the show. I'm Phil Vischer. I am here with Christian Taylor.
Hey, I go first today. That's exciting.
Hi, Christian.
Hi.
You're purple.
And
you're lavender.
With a splash of orange.
With a splash of orange. That's unusual.
It is.
Lavender and orange.
But they go together.
But it's very Asian.
It's different. Oh, Asian, yeah. And
Speaking
you're
of
very
Asian
too.
Half.
Aren't you?
Yeah, something
Red
like that.
Sky Jatani, who is also lavender, because you guys coordinated.
I'm Lavander.
And I'm lavender.
Because you're going out for Dancing with the Stars as a duo.
Yeah.
Which one of you is the star? Well, from
That
your
would be me.
travels,
It would be
seems to
me.
be Sky.
Yeah, she's in
Oh,
more.
that's true.
Everywhere you go, people are talking about Sky.
Yeah, I was just saying that. I went to Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana.
Apparently,
and
I'm big in the South,
Yeah.
which I did not know.
Can you ever
He was
travel-
also in Mississippi.
Can you ever travel to just one state?
No. That would be so boring.
Really?
Yeah.
You just have to go
Well,
to
I have
like
friends
12.
in about every one.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to travel outside of Illinois, I might as well see
You're
a
gonna
bunch
see
of them.
as many friends as you possibly
Absolutely.
can.
Yeah.
Well, that's...
Squeeze the juice out of life and the marrow
your
out of
cars.
the bone and my car. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, your car got a new car.
I
Holding
did.
Up, holding up
It was
okay?
awesome.
Okay.
It was great. Lots of carnage all over it, which is very distressing to me.
Carnage.
Bug carnage.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We still have carcasses stuck to our
Yes.
car, too.
Carcasses.
Carcasses.
Carnage.
Right.
Carnival. What's the root of all these?
Carn, it's from the Latin from flesh.
See?
Carnal?
Carnal. Yeah, same
Yeah.
thing. Flesh, carnal.
But car.
Con carne, right? And
That's
Yeah.
with meat.
Oh, with
yeah,
flesh.
with meat. It's meat. It's flesh. It's all from the Latin.
So carnival is a meat shop.
Yeah. It's a debaucherous
Okay.
meat-focused festival.
What are we talking about today?
Oh.
Maybe we should start.
I
Have
gotta
you
do a
even
theme
sung the
song.
There
theme
you
I
go.
gotta do a theme song. I need my ukulele, which it's been 2 weeks.
And
My
it stayed in
ukulele's
tune?
Stayed in tune pretty well. Yeah. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Sky. And Christian, too.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. And we actually have a guest, but we won't say who it is yet here for you. Because they're not here yet. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. There have been some more requests for specific podcast characters, but they're never any longer, well, mostly not characters that I do.
Right.
Not like my characters.
They're asking
but
you to really stretch yourself,
Yeah.
but you have no time for that.
I don't have time to stretch.
No.
I don't have time. I'm too old for new stretch marks. I'm not interested. But thank you for your requests. I disregard them all equally. We just had spring break. We were all out for
We
spring
did.
break.
Mm-hmm.
Sky and Christian dressed in lavender and drove to Mississippi.
But
Yep.
not together.
Yeah, not together.
We were on separate journeys.
Although we were near each other, but we did not.
You didn't look each other
No,
up.
we had too much going
Or
on.
do an impromptu podcast.
we were only there briefly for a few short days.
Oh, you forgot to say, Buddy's
Oh, yeah,
here.
Buddy's here too. Buddy just got bored of the podcast and wandered off to the other side of the studio.
Oh, he's coming back.
He's turned around. No, he's going to go check out Bill, the director. Buddy is checking out Bill, the director.
We need a buddy cam.
We do
We
need a
should
Buddy
put a
cam.
GoPro on his head
Yeah.
and just see his view of the podcast. I took my wife, my daughter, who is my youngest, and two of her high school friends. They're all graduating. They're all seniors to Disney World.
What a shock.
Can't believe you were at Disney World, Phil.
Me either.
I never set foot in a park.
What?
A Disney park. I did not set foot in a Disney. I know it's crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy.
Partly, it's because they wanted to be on their own, and so I was chaperoning. And I was planning on going just to the Magic Kingdom. I thought I'll just go to the Magic Kingdom. I want to check out the new expansion of Fantasyland and the new Snow White Seven Dwarf Mine Car ride. But then I ended up not doing that. Do you know why I didn't do that? Do you want to know why?
Because it costs $100.
Because it's too darn expensive.
Yeah.
Because I had three girls. Okay, and I went to get tickets for them, and I was like, 2 days. They only wanted to go to Animal Kingdom, and they wanted to go to Magic Kingdom. So,
Okay.
2 days.
2 parks.
That's easy. That's, I'm thinking in my mind that should be like, $90 a piece, so I can handle that. But then, of course, I'm talking to the concierge at the hotel to get the tickets, and she said, older kids get bored at Animal Kingdom pretty quickly, so for like $40 you can tack on a park hopper, and then they can go to 2 parks that day. And I think, okay, so that's not bad. So it'd be like, 30-ish, and then they can go to 2 parks. And so then she does the math, and it was more than that. It was more than, I already told them about it. So you can go to 2 parks. So they made their plans. So they're going to go to Animal Kingdom, and then they're going to go to Hollywood Studios, and then the next day they're going to go to Magic Kingdom all day until 1 in the morning when it was open until 1
So
a.m.
3
'cause
parks.
it's spring break. So there'd be 3 parks in 2 days.
So per person, that racks up to be...
So I say, okay, so I need 1 with a park hopper on 1 day, and then just a single park. And they do the blah, 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 do the math. Would it actually be cheaper to do a 2-day with park hopper? And I say, okay, 2 days with park hopper, 3 of them. How much could that possibly be? Do you know how much that is?
Let me guess.
2-day park hopper.
I would say 600.
$800.
Wow.
It was 8. I'm looking right at the camera to show my displeasure. It was $800 for 3 tiny little girls. They're all 18, but that's beside the point. Tiny little girls in strollers to go to 2.5 Disney theme parks.
I think Disney is kind of like the American equivalent of Mecca. In that, it's a Muslim requirement that everyone go on the Hajj at least once in their life.
Right,
They have to go to
right.
Mecca once in their life.
Right.
So it's a captive audience. You can charge whatever
Right.
you want because people have to do it. And I think so many Americans feel like they have to go to Disney World that they just charge whatever they want because it's like a rite of passage. You have to do this.
They've actually said that, I think the Disney company was quoted at some point in the last year, may have been at a shareholders meeting, that attendance is so high at the parks that the only way they can really control it is by raising prices.
Oh, really?
People just won't stop coming.
So if they made it any lower, there would be even more,
Yes,
and they
'cause
couldn't handle
there were some
it.
rides, they were 2-hour waits, on spring
Well,
break
and
week.
it's also the only little patch of that entire state of Florida that people want to occupy. So,
That's not true.
yeah, oh my goodness.
Have you been to Daytona Beach on spring break?
Have you
I
been to
have,
Boca Raton or
actually.
Fort Lauderdale?
Hey, I
Or
was
you've been
just
to
in West
South
Palm
Beach?
Beach a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
But that's not really Florida.
Yeah. So then, but one of them was a huge Harry Potter fan.
Oh, I wanted to know about that.
So
How was that
we gotta
park?
go to Universal to go to Islands of Adventure, where Harry Potter Land is.
Right.
And I've been there with my kids, and it's really cool. So I go to the concierge, and you have to speak French. Allô, concierge. I want to take my kids to Universal Studios, which is Islands of Adventure, so we can see the Harry Potter. And she says, okay, you want to see the new part, right? And yeah, because they've expanded it. They've expanded Harry Potter Land.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, so Islands of Adventure, we want to see all the new...
And everything there is.
And she said, well, here's the problem. The expansion,
Costs extra?
it's not in the same park.
What?
It's brilliant.
They have 2 parks there. They have Universal Studios, and they have Islands of Adventure.
That is a
The
racket.
first part of Harry Potter Land is in Islands of Adventure, and they did the expansion over at the other park.
That's terrible.
So if you want to see both of them, you have to go to both parks. And this is even better. This is just genius and diabolical. They made a very special ride that connects the 2 parks, which is the Hogwarts Express train ride.
Naturally.
Yes, but you can only go on that if you have a park hopper ticket. So basically, you have to have access to both parks on the same day to be able to go on one specific.
Well, and I'm assuming
Harry
you
Potter
have to find platform
ride.
9 3/4,
Yes,
which has got to be
I have a
challenging.
picture of it on my phone.
Oh.
So,
Platform 9
how much does that cost
$160
per person
per person
for 1 day?
for 1 day. Yes, if you actually want to see all the Harry Potter stuff in 1 day, it's
Wow.
$160, and they're 3 girls.
So let me ask you this.
It was $600.
You stayed in a hotel all week.
Yeah,
What hotel did you stay in?
Hilton.
Has this just become a
Downtown
travel log
Disney.
And so-
podcast, or what's the
Yeah.
deal
No,
here?
Hilton.
I mean, that had to alone...
I don't stay in Disney hotels
you only have-
because they're just too expensive.
One hotel room?
2 rooms.
2 rooms.
Two
So
rooms.
that had to be, I'm guessing, $200 a night.
$150 per room.
Okay.
$150 per room, because this is
a big, expensive
Yeah, and you think, well, it's no big deal. Hop down to Orlando, see some of the new stuff, and it was
Broke your bank.
Yeah, it was.
So you decided
I'm a
to
little
sacrifice
disappointed.
yourself and not go.
So
to a park.
Yeah, but my daughter wanted me to come with them to Universal. So I went to Universal with them, which was and the new part. I mean, the Harry Potter stuff is really cool. I just got to say. And the first part was so successful, it immediately increased the attendance of Islands of Adventure significantly. That they put even more time and energy into the second part, and it's even more detailed. It's just like you're walking into the book, into the world of Harry Potter. So that's very cool. We went on the Escape from Gringotts ride, which is very cool. And you go into a bank room, like the main floor of the bank, and there's tellers with the goblins, from Gringotts, and each one is animatronic, so they're all moving. And that's just in the queue. That's not even the ride. It's like all these. It's really cool. So they did a good job. $160, and then my daughter's thirsty. Papa, I thirst. Papa, I'm parched. Well, is there a drink fountain? No. Okay, bottle of water. How much is the Harry Potter bottle of water? It was $4. It's like, I just spent $600 so these 3 girls could walk in here.
So how much did you pay to get into the Holyland Experience?
I just pledged my allegiance to Jesus.
So you're saying you went to see Harry Potter Land, this pagan
I've been to the Holyland
witchcraft
Experience.
thing. And
I've been to the Holyland Experience because I know the family that built it.
Yeah.
And it's not terrific.
Is it
they
still
don't own it
open?
any longer. I don't know. Well, they sold it to the Crouch family of TBN.
Okay.
So it's now owned by the Trinity Broadcast Network, and they use it as a remote location.
But is it an operational theme park?
I don't know. It was never really a theme. Well,
Whatever.
It was a theme park in only the broadest sense of the term. It
Where
had a
is it?
theme.
And it was a park.
It's north of Universal, along I-4.
So
do you know the original idea behind the Holyland Experience?
No.
Which is kind of frightening.
Lay it on us.
It was a man who runs a Jewish outreach ministry, Jews for Jesus kind of a thing. Though I don't know that it was that one. And a wealthy friend who collected Bibles. And the Jewish outreach guy said, wouldn't it be awesome if in Orlando you built right off of the freeway a replica of Solomon's temple? And then Jews driving up and down the freeway would see it, and they would get off to find out about it, and then you could witness to them. That was the pitch.
I don't see that going so well.
So that reminds me when we
And I said, so it was a Jew trap? That's literally what the original idea was? And they said,
like they would just flock to it, like flies to a light.
The temple! That'd be Paul Grape, like, hi, there's the temple, everyone!
So
we gotta go.
When we were driving back we were near Memphis, just south of Memphis in Mississippi. We were driving back on I-57. We took 57.
If the Holy Land Experience was a Jew trap, what is Graceland?
White trash trap.
Stop it. I almost stopped there.
Who's buzzing? Anyway, we're driving back, and right at the intersection of 57 and I don't know, is it 70? One of those east-west highways. There is this huge, giant cross.
Yeah.
The cross at the crossroads, I think, is what it is. I mean, it's massive.
Enormous. How in the world do they build that thing?
It is just huge, and I had no idea this thing existed in Illinois. And
it's in Illinois.
It's in Illinois, yeah.
Oh.
And
it's big cement.
Far
cross.
southern Illinois.
Yeah. Kind of. But it's absolutely enormous, and there's some URL with it where you go to the website, and it's supposed to be like, oh my goodness, let's go take this exit and go see this huge cross. And I wonder how many millions of dollars did somebody spend building that thing, thinking the same kind of argument that, people will see this and it will.
Right, and then I will witness to them.
Yeah, I wonder how.
And then they will accept Jesus.
So Amanda, my wife, in the car starts typing in the URL for the thing, and it was a website that just sold little novelty crosses.
What?
What?
I've never even Googled it.
Is a novelty cross like a cross that squirts water?
It's like, just those cheap little knick-knack plastic nothings that you manufactured in China that have a verse on it or something that you can buy at this website.
Seems a little disappointing.
It was weird, but...
Speaking of the Promised Land, I have one story and then we'll pull in our guest. A reader, actually, a listener, a reader. We don't have readers, do we?
No, we don't.
A listener sent this in. I forgot your name, but thank you for sending this in. A church hang on, let me pull it up. A church in Southern California, to get people to come to their Easter service, promised access to paradise.
What do you mean by that?
Hope
Really, never mind.
Hope Unlimited Church. This was their Easter promotion. Celebrate Easter with friends. Bring a guest to Hope Unlimited on Easter Sunday, and you'll both be entered to win a family 4-pack of tickets to Disneyland.
Talk about a trap.
The more friends you bring, the more opportunities you'll have to win.
Yeah, this is not new. This happens every year. When I was more involved with the daily running of Leadership Journal, around this time of year, we'd see all kinds of stories, especially in the South, of churches offering things like a raffle to win an SUV.
If you come on
Easter Sunday, or a raffle to win a free house. I mean, all kinds of crazy giveaways.
It's kind of funny because what they're really saying is you don't really want to be at church. You really want to be at Disneyland.
Yeah.
But if you come to church,
you can get to Disneyland.
Then we will pave the way for you, not to get to heaven or to Jesus, to get to Mickey. This is the logical
outcome of a theology that says by any means necessary. Get people in by any means necessary. And
did I ever tell you what my grandpa used to do? Because he was a salesman. He was a lifelong salesman.
Is the same radio guy?
No, other side of the family.
Okay.
My dad's dad. Muscatine, Iowa, 1970s. He was an executive with
the tire guy.
Yes, the tire guy, fairly successful tire company out of Muscatine, Iowa. And he would be sometimes the Sunday school superintendent. And they believed in attendance contests to see who could bring the most kids to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. If you invited the most kids, he would give you prizes.
Oh, I remember this.
Yes, which could include, the company was Band Egg Incorporated. They were a retreader of tires. A ride in the Band Egg hot air balloon. Or the ultimate one year was, if you brought the most of your friends to Sunday school, you got a ride in the Band Egg corporate jet.
Wow.
That's not cheap.
No, it's expensive.
But those are the strings he was pulling on the corporate side.
So he started this whole trend.
And so did you enjoy your ride, Phil, when you invited the most friends?
I don't think I ever invited anyone.
I'm not surprised.
I was a shy child. I went.
What a shame for your family that you're not really a gifted evangelist.
Yeah.
Given your pedigree.
It's a bit of a letdown, I acknowledge. Okay, we're going to pull in our special guest. We have to pause to get him on the phone, and we'll be right back. Okay, we're back with our guest. The guest is none other than my own dearest brother. Of all my brothers, this is the dearest.
You only have one.
My brother, Rob. Who is he's a Harvard Law grad. He is the dean of the law school at St. Thomas University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's the author of 2 books. 2 books, right? You can talk.
Correct. 2 books. 2 books.
One on Martin Luther King Jr. and the other one on something too esoteric for me to remember. What was your first book on?
Conscience? Is that too esoteric?
Conscience,
the
that's
liberty
right.
of conscience?
The liberty of conscience.
Sounds like he's the right person for our topic.
Yeah, so we have a topic today. There was a little, I'm trying to decide if it was a brouhaha or if it was a kerfuffle.
It was a brouhaha. I'm going with that. But I love the word kerfuffle.
What's the Italian word for it?
It was a brouhaha. The Italian word?
Because it involved pizza, didn't it?
Yeah, it did involve pizza. So Indiana, as we know, passed a law. You know about Indiana. It's a state. It's near Illinois. I go through it often. Indiana passed a law called a RFRA. RFRA.
They need to buy a vowel.
RFRA.
Yeah.
RFRA, which means Restoration of Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which numerous other states also have.
And there's a federal
19
version.
of them. And there's a federal version. And Indiana passed one, and the world turned upside down. Apple chief executive Tim Cook condemned the law in an op-ed in the Washington Post. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe wrote a letter to the Indianapolis Star inviting business leaders to move to Virginia. The president of the NCAA hinted that the Indiana-based athletic organization may stop holding major events there. And the rock band Wilco canceled a May 7th show in Indianapolis. But wait, there's more, involving a little pizza place. So Memories Pizza. Memories Pizza.
Sounds like a lovely place to eat dinner.
Doesn't that sound sweet and innocent and like childhood?
It does,
sounds
but
like
something
childhood.
tells me.
But it doesn't sound like good pizza.
It's so good, it will make a wonderful memory.
Gino's Pizza or Aurelio's.
My memories of pizza.
Memories.
Memories Pizza on Tuesday evening. Here's how it went down, as reported by... Oh, who's reporting this? I don't even know who's reporting this. On Tuesday evening, a news report from a local ABC affiliate concerning a Walkerton, Indiana pizza restaurant and the recently enacted Religious Freedom Restoration Act went viral and engulfed everything that came into its path, including Yelp, Twitter, a web hosting company, a news station, and even the Indiana State Legislature. All the while, it fed the internet's insatiable appetite for outrage. In the report, Memories Pizza proprietor Crystal O'Connor is captured saying that while her restaurant would continue to serve gay customers in light of the law, it would decline to cater a same-sex wedding if asked. After the video went viral, supporters...
Okay, hold on. Who is inviting a little pizzeria to cater their wedding?
Good question. Would not be me.
Apparently you did not grow up in rural Indiana. After the video went viral, supporters of gay rights overwhelmed the restaurant's Yelp page with one-star reviews, angry comments, numerous jokes about whether any gay wedding has ever been catered by a pizzeria.
There you go.
And obscene photos. According to a Yelp spokesperson, an automated recommendations engine filtered the reviews for relevance, but even as they deleted obscene photos and unprintable reviews from the site, more poured in to replace them. As this story was being prepared, Yelp had removed more than 6,000 reviews for violating its terms of service and buried another 1,000 reviews under the page's not currently recommended section. A mock website created anonymously at memoriespizza.com lampooned the restaurant as a gay-friendly establishment offering up an erotic gay video and links to gay dating apps, along with fake quotes. One, Jess Dooley, threatened to burn down the pizza parlor on Twitter, and her tweet served as a rallying cry for conservative supporters of the parlor's anti-gay stance. Then she was suspended from her post as golf coach at Concord High School. Dooley deleted her Twitter account and her AOL email address. Some Twitter users unaware of this fact have taken to harassing another Jess Dooley, an unrelated woman who lives in Australia.
Oh, poor thing.
It just gets better. The pizzeria itself has closed down indefinitely and possibly permanently, according to a report on Glenn Beck's site. Walkerton, Indiana, population 2,200, has been overrun by media attention. A gaggle of reporters descended upon the closed storefront while a Chicago-based rock band, Split Single, drove down to Walkerton and distributed $100 worth of non-discriminatory pizza to press and passers-by.
So everyone who's looking for some media attention is jumping onto this story.
It's nuts. It's crazy.
Now, I heard somewhere that they've been given like $800,000 in donations.
Someone started basically a crowdfunding campaign to support the pizza parlor, and it has raised more than $850,000.
Right.
So, in fact, they may be able to retire if they can't reopen their pizza parlor.
Wow.
So it's interesting that a tiny pizza parlor in a tiny town in rural Indiana would become a doppelganger for the culture war.
Right.
Like a stand-in, a surrogate.
It's a proxy war.
A proxy, a pawn, a puppet. Yeah.
Okay, so what are we asking, Rob?
That's usually my question.
Yes.
That's what a Harvard law degree will get you.
Rob likes
Firm opinion about pizza.
So, okay, in a nutshell, Rob, what's a RFRA?
So RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, was passed back in the 90s in response to a Supreme Court case called Employment Division versus Smith. In Employment Division versus Smith, the Supreme Court ruled that a law that is facially neutral and generally applicable can be enforced even if it has the effect of infringing on someone's religious liberty.
What does that mean?
Congress, in that case, it was a Native Americans who ingested peyote and lost employee benefits, unemployment benefits because of that, because that contradicted federal law. It was a controlled substance. They said that they had a religious freedom right to ingest peyote, and the courts ruled that no, these laws on drug use and the employment policies that flow from those are neutral and generally applicable. The fact that an effect of the law was to infringe on your ability to practice your religion, which for these individuals involved ingesting peyote as part of the ceremony of their Native American religion, was beside the point.
Okay,
the law was facial.
Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
The law was neutral on its face, which means when you read the words of the law, there's nothing to suggest that it's anti-religion. It was also generally applicable, meaning it didn't just single out Native Americans for not being able to, participate in these sorts of ceremonies or to take drugs, et cetera. It was for everybody. And so the court said, as long as it's neutral and applies to everybody, the fact that a law has the effect of inhibiting someone's ability to practice their religion is irrelevant.
So at that point, the court said, sorry, Native Americans, you either get peyote or your unemployment benefits, not both.
Right. So they lost, and there was such a bipartisan outcry that Congress overwhelmingly passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act signed by President Clinton. And what that held is that when the government, and this was a federal law, so it's talking about the federal government, when the federal government passes a law that has the effect of inhibiting someone's ability to practice their religion, the government has the burden of showing that that law furthers a compelling government interest and that the law is narrowly tailored to accomplishing that interest.
And a part
That's confusing.
A part of that is that they have to show that there isn't an easier way to accomplish the same thing that doesn't infringe.
Right. So, for example, let's say that the government wanted to protect individuals against poisonous snake bites. Well, everybody would agree that's a compelling government interest. The government has an interest in preventing poisonous snake bites. But let's say the way they did that was to pass a law shutting down all churches. Well, the percentage of churches that practice snake handling is a pretty small fraction of churches, even though there are some that practice snake handling, and there are some where there might be poisonous snake bites as a result. Passing a law shutting down all churches would not be narrowly tailored to achieving the state's interest in protecting citizens against poisonous snake bites. That would not be a narrowly tailored law.
Okay, so two things, if I recall. When this law passed in the early 90s and was signed by President Clinton, it had almost unanimous support by both Democrats and Republicans in the Congress. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so it was an overwhelmingly supported bipartisan bill. Secondly, this was the same bill that was in question, or the same law that was in question in the Hobby Lobby case last summer.
Right.
Correct.
And the courts ruled that the government had ways of accomplishing its health care law that could be accomplished without infringing on the owners of Hobby Lobby's religious rights.
There was a point where this law was not controversial.
Right.
And not partisan.
Right.
And that changed. How much of the Hobby Lobby case is what changed that?
Well, okay, so just backing up a little bit, the reason it was not controversial when it was introduced in the 90s is it was conceived of as usually supporting the politically powerless against government interests.
Right.
So more of the smaller religions trying to practice their way of life. And now it's being at least perceived as helping those who are at least perceived as having more political power make life more difficult for those who have traditionally lacked political power.
And was that the case in the Hobby Lobby case?
No. So the Hobby Lobby case has made it more controversial, primarily because Hobby Lobby basically expanded religious liberty to include for-profit corporations.
Right.
And the Indiana version of RFRA that was enacted explicitly defines person to include corporations, and that's controversial.
Is that the first state RFRA that has done that?
I don't think it's the first that has done that. I think there's been several others, and then there's been even more than that that have been interpreted by courts to include corporations, even if they don't explicitly reference that in their language. And in my view, that part shouldn't be all that controversial, because when you think about the conflicts involving religion and religious believers' ability to exercise the dictates of their faith, often that's going to occur in a commercial setting where you have people working with companies, whether it's a mom and pop store or whether it's a sole proprietorship pharmacy, whatever the case may be. These are companies. These are not individuals. They're practicing through a corporate entity. And so if you were going to exclude that from all religious liberty protection, you would leave a huge gap in our religious liberty framework. Okay,
Rob. So the way I've heard this whole story reported in the media, it's that the law that was passed in Indiana and that's been proposed in some other states is not exactly a replica of the federal law, but would open up the possibility for local businesses to discriminate against certain classes of people that they don't want to serve, which would essentially gut our public accommodation civil rights laws that have been on the books since the 1960s. Is that accurate?
No, it's not accurate. The two differences with the Indiana law and the federal law is, one, as I mentioned, it explicitly includes corporations within the definition of a person protected by the law. And two, it is the law can be invoked by individuals when actions are brought against them, when the federal RFRA did not do so explicitly, but it has been interpreted to allow that. And so just a word on that, the reason that these state RFRAs, because remember, we already have the federal RFRA, but that doesn't apply to state actions. So any sort of state agency actions are unaffected by the federal RFRA. That's why individual states are passing RFRAs. And so one of the cases that really brought this to the surface was in New Mexico. There was a wedding photographer that declined to participate in a same-sex ceremony, and they were brought up on charges before the state Human Rights Commission and fined, I think, $7,000 or so. And so the Indiana RFRA, in acknowledgement of that case, wanted individuals to be able to invoke RFRA even when they're facing claims brought by other individuals, as was the case in New Mexico, through a state human rights agency.
So,
and we don't have to get. Go ahead.
Well, so what is the essence of the controversy in Indiana? Because the way it's being spun is people are making it sound like we're suddenly going to start discriminating in businesses and hotels and public accommodations again, based on gender or race or religion or sexual orientation. Is that completely false, or is that a legitimate fear?
In my view, that's completely false. Because if you were a restaurant and you said, "Oh, because of my religious faith, we are no longer going to serve any gays or lesbians in this restaurant," I firmly believe that the state could come along and say, we have a compelling interest in eliminating discrimination against gays and lesbians, and this is a narrowly tailored measure to do that. And I think a court would say, yeah, we rule for the government. Discrimination against entire classes of people is something we've recognized as a society is wrong, and we want to eliminate it. So what's at stake, what RFRA is aiming to protect in the conflict over gay rights is not discrimination against gays and lesbians as a class, but providing space for religious objectors not to participate in same-sex weddings, which is different. There's still a discriminatory element to this, but it's a lot different than saying we don't serve gays at this pizzeria versus will we help provide auxiliary services for a ceremony to which we object on religious grounds? And you can have debates about whether that's legitimate or not, but that's a lot different than just categorical discrimination.
Which is what the owner who was interviewed, or whoever this was from Memories Pizza, said, is we'd be happy to continue to serve anyone in our restaurant, regardless of their sexual orientation, but we would decline an invitation to cater a gay wedding.
Right. Now, the question that I think that businesses like that have to answer is, well, would you decline to serve pizzas to a frat party where you know there's rampant drunkenness and promiscuity? And is this something you're really going to apply across the board when you know there's events that conflict with your religious dictates and you're not going to participate by providing them pizza?
Well, now you're opening Pandora's box.
Well, but see, I don't even think it's Pandora's box in the reality of the market, because most businesses are trying to make money on what they do. So they have a natural incentive not to be too broad in how they're interpreting these dictates. But I do think it's a legitimate question for a pizzeria or a restaurant. It might be different than it is for a wedding photographer. So a wedding photographer who's asked to artistically frame, document, and make a record of a ceremony that they believe conflicts with the dictates of their faith might be a little different than someone who's just asked, "Can you give 5 large sausage pizzas?"
Right. Can you rent us 10 tables?
And it also
some chairs?
It seems different in my mind between baking some pizzas or even baking a cake and being a wedding photographer, because if you're a photographer, you actually have to participate in the ceremony. And it seems kind of absurd to me that the government could force anybody to participate in a religious ceremony that they disagree with of any sort. I mean, can the government force a florist to create flower arrangements at a Hindu wedding around
Now,
idol?
there was, just for clarity, that someone went into a bakery and asked them to bake a cake that said basically God hates fags on it, so it had a very derogatory message about homosexuality. The bakery refused. They took them to court. I think it was kind of a stunt, to see. And just in the last few days, that was turned over. Said no, they don't have to do that
because that's a freedom of speech issue.
Because it's derogatory speech, and derogatory speech is not something that is commercially protected in the same way as a class of people. So here's the question, though, Rob. Can our current judicial system and or political climate parse these differences at all? Or is everyone just going to get whacked with bats to the sides of their heads?
Everybody's going to get whacked with bats. And that's why the episode it's disturbing on several levels from my view, because it shows our inability to acknowledge any nuance in these debates on several dimensions. So one would be, for a long time, folks, including I have said that if Christians are going to make the case against same-sex marriage, they're going to have to start drawing persuasive distinctions between race and sexual orientation in terms of the law and culture's treatment of those statuses. I think that conversation is virtually over, and I think that those distinctions have not been drawn at all. So our culture now does equate discrimination based on race with discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, including same-sex marriage within the broader framework as anti-gay discrimination. Another lack of nuance, I think, is to draw distinctions, as I mentioned before, between discrimination against people and a refusal to participate in certain acts or ceremonies that are objectionable. They're all being lumped together. A third lack of nuance, I would say, is this: we're moving further and further toward this bright line distinction that faith is a matter for the privacy of your home or the privacy of the sanctuary, and when it emerges past those boundaries, it is to be treated with suspicion and skepticism and reined in by law as necessary, because otherwise it's being imposed on people. So this private-public distinction for faith is becoming more and more pronounced, and I think that's a false distinction. And then I think that in general, the public support for religious liberty is getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and that should be a concern for all people of faith, and I think people who are not of a faith tradition, but should recognize that that's been one of the hallmarks of our society.
Right. Here's. I'm a little concerned about some of the hyperbole that's involved on both sides. So Tim Cook said, "There's something very dangerous happening in states across the country. A wave of legislation introduced in more than 24 states would allow people to discriminate against their neighbors." So that's from the left. That's Tim Cook, the head of Apple, in his op-ed. Mike Huckabee, on the other side, said this activism, this basically gay rights attack, won't stop until there are no more churches, until there are no more people who are spreading the gospel, as Mike Huckabee talking on the Family Research Council radio. So on one side, the RFRA laws are scary and dangerous, because they will allow widespread discrimination. On the other side, this is just another example of the gay rights activists trying ultimately to shut down all churches and all evangelism.
No, so yeah, both of those are unhelpful, and I mean, very frankly, I find very little that Mike Huckabee has ever said on this subject to be remotely helpful. The way I would frame it is this: where we are as a society on race in the public square and in terms of discrimination, that's where we're moving very quickly when it comes to sexual orientation and same-sex marriage.
Right.
So does that mean that all churches get shut down? No, of course not. But does that mean that Christian colleges that have policies prohibiting same-sex conduct are going to face some pretty choppy waters, perhaps choppy waters on accreditation and other issues? Yeah, I do think that's more where we're heading. Maybe not immediately, but I think it's a legitimate concern for those who espouse a traditional Christian view of sexuality, because sexual autonomy is becoming one of the only sort of rallying points that culture can really get behind.
Right.
And when that runs up against something, the power behind that norm is becoming more and more hard to deny or escape.
Is the freedom to self-define the only American freedom that we can agree on anymore?
Well, yeah, and some of that comes from Supreme Court cases in the abortion line of cases where, not in the Roe case, but in the Casey case, the Supreme Court had a very famous line about, the right to define the mystery of life and the meaning of one's existence. That's really paramount to our society and to modern life and to the American experience. And when that self-definition prevails in the legal culture, that can be very tricky for faith traditions of all kinds.
Right.
So one of the factors in the current story that I found fascinating was the economic piece to it all, because the Indiana governor signed this bill, and almost immediately you had people like Tim Cook from Apple and other companies and organizations.
Angie's List, Salesforce.com.
Salesforce, all these groups were saying we're either going to leave the state or we should boycott the state or this is horrible. And the economic hammer came down. This is the same thing that happened when Arizona was thinking about passing a similar law. Was it last year? All these corporations said, hey, if you do this, we're not going to come to your state.
And the NFL said, and we don't know if we want to bring the Super Bowl to Arizona.
So with that kind of economic pressure being put on these state governments, then there was a very quick move to amend these laws or change them or whatever. So clearly it wasn't primarily outrage from the LGBT community or just political activism that motivated the change. It was economic interest, which frankly has been part of the civil rights movement for decades. There's been an awareness that when you pressure people in the pocketbook, you tend to get more change than if you just go for purely...
But that's partly because there's been such a buy-in to the movement from larger corporations now looking at their hiring.
My point...
And looking at the moods of the next generation of consumers and the next generation of kids they want to hire.
Exactly. But does that sort of economic pressure short-circuit any kind of really meaningful legal or political debate around these issues, because it just comes down to whatever's going to get jobs going, whatever's going to keep the market happy, rather than actually nuanced, thoughtful, legally sound engagement with these issues, the kind that Rob's trying to have on this podcast, just gets thrown out the window because we either hear extreme voices from one side or you have economic interests on the other, and that's, at the end of the day, the deciding factor in our laws.
Yes, I would agree that on the left, so in the Democratic Party, this is a touchstone issue, the rights of sexual autonomy, and so they're, for the most part, going to be pushing this very hard. And in the GOP, there's a bit of a split, but there's going to be tremendous pressure from the business wing of the GOP to make these laws go away to the extent they're bad for business. So I do think you're going to see a much stronger move away from these laws as we go forward, which I think is a shame. But part of the reason it's a shame, and part of the reason you could understand the reaction of those on the left, and particularly those from the GLBT community, is if Christians had been outspoken on issues that were of importance to the LGBT community over the years, whether it's AIDS or whether it's bullying in schools or other things that I think Christians really should be rallying with the LGBT community on, if that had happened, there might not have been such a knee-jerk reaction to a law like this as anti-gay. So part of the reflex to label this part of a broader anti-gay move by Christians and conservative Christians especially has to be viewed against the broader backdrop that we haven't taken the opportunity to speak out on issues where we really could be of help and of assistance, and we've just either been silent or been opposed to it. And so now this is just the latest example of traditional Christians being anti-gay.
Right.
I have a question.
Christian has a question.
So, I mean, the thing that's concerning to me in this, or, that really makes me wonder, is how does all of this backlash, and a lot of it from the, gay community, how does all of those negative things that have happened to this pizza stand further the cause of gay rights? It doesn't seem to me to help anything. It seems to make it worse. That's an observation.
Rob, did you read the article in The Atlantic? Was that this morning, yesterday?
I read the article in The Atlantic. I read one last week that I thought was very thoughtful. And one of the questions this person asked was, I think this is an Atlantic article, was for gay rights proponents, how many of your grandparents are strongly in favor of gay marriage, and would you want their businesses to be shut down if they're not strongly in favor of gay marriage?
Yeah, that's the one. The title of the article is, Should Mom and Pops That Forgo Gay Weddings Be Destroyed? And it starts out, what do white evangelicals, Muslims, Mormons, blacks, conservative Republicans, and immigrants from Africa, South America, and Central America all have in common? They're less likely to support gay marriage than the average Californian. And then he goes on to describe all the restaurants he's patronized owned by members of all of those groups. Today, if I went out into greater Los Angeles and chatted up owners of mom and pop restaurants, I'd sooner or later find one who would decline to cater a gay wedding. The owners might be members of Rick Warren's church in Orange County, or a family of immigrants in Little Ethiopia, or a single black man or woman in Carson or Inglewood or El Segundo. Should we destroy their livelihoods? And his conclusion is, which I think is pretty compelling. It's a very well-written and well-thought-out piece. But his conclusion is that it's more hateful to say, burn down that pizza stand, than it is to say, we will continue serving gay customers, but we would prefer not to cater a gay wedding ceremony. So with those kind of voices, as hitting as broadly as The Atlantic, does that help calm people down at all?
I would hope so. And I do think that, when you talk to thoughtful gay rights supporters, of which, most gay rights supporters are thoughtful, and I think they appreciate that there was some overreach in the reaction to the Memories Pizza incident. So I'm not even focused on the Memories Pizza incident, because I do think that's an unfortunate, if in some ways, just an outcome of our social media culture, where the loudest voices and the most extreme voices get the most play. It was
a flash mob.
Right, it was a flash mob. But in terms of the law itself, I do think that that's a more accurate reflection both of culture in terms of what they're calling the elite, but more of the influencers of culture, and where the legal system is going, where discrimination is discrimination is discrimination. And that's one of the things society can get behind, is discrimination is wrong always, no matter what.
I was at a Pizza Hut in Cocoa Beach 3 or 4 days ago, and the man in front of me was trying to get service, but he wasn't wearing a shirt. And they kicked him out.
At the beach?
At Cocoa Beach. Yeah, literally like 50 yards off the beach. He wanted to have the buffet, the cheap Pizza Hut lunch buffet, but he wasn't wearing a shirt. And they said, "We don't serve your kind here."
The shirtless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did this man happen to have the name Phil Vischer?
No, Rob.
Okay.
No, but I mean, that's discrimination, right? No shirt, no shoes, no service.
Yeah, but that's not shirtless is not a protected class.
Shouldn't it be?
No.
Shouldn't it be?
It's
All discrimination is wrong.
Some people
Sky.
should wear a shirt.
What? You don't have any money to pay for your meal? Don't discriminate against me. I mean, it's ludicrous when you say all discrimination is wrong.
Yeah,
it's
but
ludicrous.
what some very libertarian voices are trying to say on the other side is, hey, if I'm an American and I'm a business owner, I should have the right to serve who I want and whom I don't want. And that's a very bad idea.
That's a bad idea.
Because then you get all kinds of...
We don't serve your
would
kind
you,
here.
if you go into a Pizza Hut and somebody realizes, oh, you're a Christian, we're not going to serve you, we'd be upset about that too. We have to have some shared common rules for the public square that say everyone gets accommodated, everyone can be served regardless of race, gender, all that sort of stuff. But I think what Rob's trying to get us to understand here and what the nuance of this debate is that's not occurring is there's a difference between discriminating against somebody because of their sexual identity and discriminating against what activities you would prefer to cater
to not
or serve in,
right.
which is a very different thing. And I was very disappointed when the Supreme Court chose not to hear that case about the photographer in New Mexico, because I think that could have been a very important one in delineating the difference between those things.
Right, and the events of Indiana over the last week or two have also sort of proven the parade of horribles that opponents to same-sex marriage have trotted out over the last decade, but proponents of same-sex marriage largely said, oh, you guys are just being hysterical because same-sex marriage isn't going to affect you, it's not going to hurt you, how's it going to affect your lives? If you don't want a same-sex marriage, don't have one, et cetera.
Right, you'll never have to participate in a same-sex wedding. Right,
and what I think some of the more thoughtful opponents of same-sex marriage, and not all of them are thoughtful on either side, but the more thoughtful ones said, we have a hard time as a society embracing a new norm and not making it all-encompassing. Right? So if we're really going down this path, that means it is going to affect everything. And I do, for good or for worse, I think that's where we're going, where this will be the more universal norm. I mean, to compare it to an egregious case of discrimination, if you look at the reaction to the fraternity brothers in Oklahoma, who sang the horribly racist song on the bus in a 10-second video clip, where not only were some of them expelled, but some of their families' homes were protested. I mean, it just, and not that they shouldn't have been, but that's an example where we as a society have collectively determined that this is beyond the pale and we will not permit it. And you see the outcome of that. And we're not there yet on same-sex marriage, but we're moving toward that where discrimination against gays and lesbians, even if it means discrimination in the form of not wanting to participate in same-sex marriage, is moving toward more of a universal norm that will not be tolerated.
Is it partly, though, the fact that as a country we have hundreds of years of history of systemic, legally enforced racism in the form of slavery, of Jim Crow, of lynchings? I mean, it's just our entire history is saturated with this racial injustice. And so as we've come out of that, or as we've tried to come out of that, the reaction has been sort of a zero tolerance because of our unique history in that area. But I don't want to say LGBT folks haven't been discriminated against. They certainly have, but it hasn't been the systemic kind of racism.
Multi-century.
Yeah, institutionalized slavery and all those kinds of things that are true of racial injustice in our country. So is it unfair to make them civil rights equivalents, or am I missing something?
No, I would say it's unfair for a couple of reasons. One is we were very aggressive with the Civil Rights Act in intervening in what would normally be considered private affairs, such as whether a restaurant owner could discriminate in terms of who could be customers, or in stores, shops, every clubs, everything. That was a consequence of Jim Crow laws being so pervasive and so tightly woven as a cohesive framework of exclusion and oppression that aggressive intervention was going to be necessary to break Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing comparable when it comes to gay and lesbian rights to Jim Crow.
Right.
The second lesson I would say is you look at how many decades and centuries the debate over race played out in our country and compare that to the debate over same-sex marriage. I mean, we have zero patience for this debate to play out now. If you look, just 3 years ago, President Obama was opposed to same-sex marriage. And now, if you're a pizza owner saying you're opposed to same-sex marriage, all sorts of fury is unleashed against you.
Right.
It's just going at such a rapid pace. I do think it's unfair, and it's inconsistent with how we identify ourselves as a nation that values pluralism, if not religious freedom, in saying, you know what, we're moving pretty fast. Let's give it some time, and not to minimize the negative impact that it can have when you're the victim of discrimination, but we also have to realize that life is complicated, and when you have these contested moral views, it's good to live and let live a bit.
So, Rob, do you foresee any chance that there could be a backlash? I'm thinking about that. Was it Mozilla, the CEO of that company, who was pretty much forced to resign because it turned out years ago he donated money to some
$20 to Prop 8.
Right, and these pizza owners. Is there any chance that there could be a public outcry that says, okay, folks, enough is enough. We can't keep demonizing people who a few years ago we would have all found completely acceptable, but now because they're not right at the front of the cultural moment, we need to threaten to burn down their establishments. Is there any threat of a backlash, or is this kind of the new norm?
Well, I think that I don't know if I would call it a backlash, but I hope and think it's entirely possible that folks will see the Memories Pizza example as an unfortunate outgrowth of the move toward greater equality for gays and lesbians. In terms of the underlying legal issue in the battle between religious liberty and acceptance of same-sex marriage, I don't see as much hope for that on the substance because, in large part, in our society, and especially among younger Americans, I think you see an equation with the civil rights claims on race and the civil rights claims from gays and lesbians, particularly as it applies to marriage. So that, I think, we're on a clearer trajectory.
All right, we're out of time. We have to let Rob go back to running his law school. How's it going up there? Law school?
It's great.
Is it a good time to be in the law school business?
It's a good time to be in the law school. You're all invited to stop by St. Thomas School of Law whenever you'd like, and we'll show you a good time.
And if our listeners stop by the law school, do they just ask for Rob?
That's right. I will be hiding under my desk, but you're free to ask for Rob.
Okay, we'll let you go. Do you want to hear the wrap-up song, or would you rather just get back to work now?
No, I would not miss the opportunity to hear the wrap-up song.
Oh, dear. Okay. Then you can tell me if I'm in legal hot water with anything I may sing about. Hey, friends. I'd like to meet ya, but it doesn't mean I want to serve your gay wedding with my pizza. Hey, friends. I don't think it is a good solution to run me out of business just because I have a ceremony or two that I'd rather not participate in with you, but you can still come to my Pizza Hut and I'll give you the buffet, even if you're not exactly like me in one or two ways. I'll still let you eat pizza that's been sitting on the warmer for 3 days.
Unless you're not wearing a shirt.
Unless you're not wearing a shirt. Okay, thanks, Rob.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.